Can you believe it? It was exactly a year ago that Global Citizen was here in South Africa. It's an international movement of engaged citizens who are using their collective voice to end extreme poverty by 2030. It's, as I mentioned, a year since the Global Citizen concert was held, where $7.2 billion, or over 140 billion rand of pledges to end extreme poverty were received. To give us an update, we were joined now in studio by Hugh Evans, who is the CEO of Global Citizen, and Tukwini Mandela from the House of Mandela. They were the sponsors of the Global Citizen Festival Mandela 100 that was back in 2018, along with the Motsepe Foundation. Good to have both of you. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's an absolute pleasure, and it's so lovely to see you again in studio, Hugh. I mean, I can't believe it was a year ago. It's just making you realize how fast things go. But so we're here to give an update. How are we looking? How are things going?
Well, exactly a year following Global Citizen Mandela 100, obviously it was an incredible moment where the world came together, over 16 heads of state, 12 international institutions, and they all pledged over $7.2 billion on stage at the FNB Stadium in front of 70,000 global citizens who'd all earned their way in. And a year on, we're proud today to release the one-year report that tracks the commitments. And 1 year in, over 83% of the commitments that were made on stage are on track to be delivered on time. And over the last year alone, over 12 billion rand has been delivered to projects and programs across South Africa in the last 12 months.
Yeah, I'm going to get into some detail about those programs because I'd love to know which ones they are. But from the House of Mandela's perspective, are you happy with the way things have turned out since the event last year?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we got such great feedback from Global Citizen. And I know initially people thought that it was just a concert. You know, people wanted to come see Beyonce and Jay-Z, but it was far more than that. I think this was emphasized by my grandfather's speech at Trafalgar Square, where he said that poverty, extreme poverty, was a man-made problem. Yeah. And if it was a man-made problem, we as global citizens could eradicate it. So it wasn't a matter of charity, it was a matter of human rights and dignity for all people who live below the poverty line. So for us, this was a great way to amplify that as a House of Mandela, and it was a great way to get people from all over the world to be involved. The entire concept of global citizen is that all of us are global citizens and all of us have a part to play in ensuring that we lift our brothers and sisters up who are not necessarily as privileged as we are.
Yeah. So we break down the numbers, and I know you were looking into them. So we say that over $2.5 billion or 36.7 billion rand has been dispersed or allocated in South Africa and around the world. What are those kind of projects that have benefited from this?
Well, let me give you a few examples here in South Africa. So if you recall last year, everyone had to earn their way into the festival. They couldn't buy a ticket.
Indeed.
And so about 86,000 actions were taken in support of one of our campaigns called It's Bloody Time, calling on menstrual hygiene management practices and particularly to subsidize kids in underserved communities to have access to menstrual hygiene products. And in response, President Ramaphosa got up on stage and he pledged 157 million rand to provide menstrual hygiene products in schools across KZN, Eastern Cape, Limpopo, and that money has now been delivered over the last 12 months. One other example was focused on pit latrines in South Africa and the devastating effects that pit latrines can have on hygiene across schools. And the Global Citizens took over 50,000 actions calling on the South African government to really transform unsafe pit latrines into clean working toilets in schools across South Africa. And in the last year alone, over 700 million rand has been delivered across South Africa, targeting 600 schools, particularly to provide access to safe, really clean, hygienic toilets across South African schools. And that's just two examples. Another great example is Global Citizens, in partnership with our partner Nedbank, work to provide vaccines and immunizations as part of a 5 million rand allocation that was made by Nedbank. And already 16,000 kids across the Eastern Cape have been vaccinated as part of Nedbank's vaccination program. So all of these have been delivered in the last 12 months, and that's just some examples of programs across South Africa, and there's many others around the world as well.
Yeah. I mean, look, these are massive commitments that have been made, and to hopefully help. But I mean, the situation, it was never going to change overnight. It never will, and that's the reality. It's still, people look around and say, yeah, but I don't see a difference around me. Have you yourself actually seen some of the changes happening in some of these projects in action?
Look, yes, I have, and I think that just the project that Hugh mentioned with providing young girls with sanitary pads, that makes a huge difference in a girl's life, because if she's going through her monthly cycle and she doesn't have anything to make sure that she to put on to make sure that she can go to school, that's a day of school missed, right? So if that's a day of school missed, imagine how many days of school are missed each year because she's going through that cycle. So for me, it's a personal thing because I'm female. And this is something that I know that other girls have gone through. So for me, that's something that's personal that I can see a direct improvement. And just to add to what you has said, we as House of Mandela, my grandfather has a farm in Qunu, as most people know, and I don't know if people knew that he was an avid farmer. So we've decided to start a food security project in Qunu to help the people of the Eastern Cape. I think the Eastern Cape, there's people in the Eastern Cape. Is the second nationally of people who live below the poverty line. So this is an issue of serious concern to us. We want to make sure that we can have a demonstration farm in Qunu so people can learn how to farm and grow their own food. South Africa, the Eastern Cape has large amounts of arable land, and that land is not being farmed properly. People in the Eastern Cape get their food from Durban, which is ridiculous. It's something that somebody told me when we're busy, making plans for the farm. So these are things that we want to, projects that we want to support and make sure that, even if they don't necessarily make a huge splash, right? These are affecting people's lives directly. Because if we can affect, 10 people's lives, imagine what those people can do by going out and affecting other people's lives. So hopefully all of these actions through Global Citizen and through House of Mandela will have a ripple effect, they will have a snowball effect, and we can see results hopefully in the next few years. So Global Citizen doesn't necessarily have the panacea for all of the social ills that we face in South Africa, but we can certainly make an effort.
And that's the whole idea. I mean, it's not, like we say, it's not going to change overnight. You cannot solve all the world's problems, but it is a commitment, and getting these big names onto stage that are also offering their time and coming through and doing it. But I suppose one of the big deals is you see, everybody gets wrapped up in the excitement.
That's right.
I'm going to donate this, and I'm going to give that, and like we said, there were 16 governments, 8 international institutions, foundations, 12 corporates who said that they would make pledges. Have they all stuck to their word?
Well, there's a couple that are not on track, and that's the whole point of Global Citizen. We see our job is to provide accountability and actually make sure that we launch new actions if governments don't follow through. So actually today on the platform, you can see one commitment that was made by the US government to support agriculture is currently not on track. We haven't had enough information from USAID. And in that case, Global Citizen will take on the role of journalist and actually try to interrogate that world leader and make sure they follow through and hold their feet to the fire. Because ultimately, this has to be a decade of action and accountability. It's not just about making grand proclamations on stage when you're in front of 70,000 people. It's about the follow through. That's why today's report is so important. That's why we're so proud to be releasing this report in partnership with the House of Mandela today to make sure that people know exactly what impact has happened, and they can also hold government's feet to the fire themselves.
I mean, it is so important because it's your reputation at stake as well.
Absolutely.
When a lot of people come forward and say, all these promises are made, and and then you get guys that just don't come forward. So it's a platform that you're given, but if you don't follow through, it has a very bad repercussion. So, I mean, have you seen this happen before? Hold the people to account, and then they actually do follow through. Have you seen this happen?
We see it very regularly, actually.
I'm sure.
In fact, there was a couple of examples. A couple of years ago, a foreign minister of a European nation, I won't name which nation, was complaining that he wasn't allowed on stage at Global Citizen because he'd just slashed foreign aid. And so Global Citizens actually tweeted at that foreign minister, and sure enough, the following year, this particular government reversed their trend and started to increase foreign aid again. It actually, the power of citizen accountability is very powerful. And as I said earlier, over 83% of the commitments made on stage are on track to be delivered on time. We're really proud of that. But ultimately, that's why if you go to globalcitizen.org and start taking action today, read the report, read the Mandela 100 report, and see for yourself exactly which governments have followed through, which haven't, and call on those that haven't to actually be accountable for their word.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, I think it's so great. I don't know if you've got any comments on that, because this is it's a problem that that happens all over. Is that people, when given the spotlight, promise the world, and then when the spotlight is switched off, they just walk away and say, okay, well, there you go. You know, we got our moment of fame, and that's where it ends.
Listen, I don't necessarily believe in relying on governments to make changes in the world. I haven't heard of a government that was responsible for any, social changes. It's people on the ground who've bared on the government and pressured them to make those changes. Yeah. So we are global citizens. We have the power and the responsibility to make sure that they follow through.
Yeah.
I've seen grandmothers in the Western Cape, for example, who've started, schools because the government just wasn't prepared to follow through, and they've gotten funding to make sure that those things happen. So I think that for us, it's important as global citizens to remember that the government is not the only one that can actually enact these changes. We have the power to do the same thing as well.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah, very much so. I want to talk a little bit about, I just want to reverse, as we say, we're talking to the good that has come out of it, and it's amazing that we've seen all this follow through. However, and I can't ignore it, Hugh, what happened a year ago was also very bad for a lot of the citizens and a lot of the people that went to the concert. They came out, there was, a lot of talk about the safety and the security of people there. What do you have to say? Have you been in contact with any of these people and those victims that may have been through what they did? And you heard some of the negative responses from people saying, there was so much protection of the VIPs and the musicians and the artists and the heads of state that were there, but all the people outside, no one cared about them. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously reflected deeply on it. It was an unfortunate situation that occurred. And we want to thank the Minister of Police for responding so quickly and acknowledging the responsibility of government to respond in their jurisdiction. We've also realised that safety and security is now a global concern. It's something that I believe as society we need to reflect on about how do we make sure that people who are part of large gatherings, particularly post 9/11 and the planet, actually can do so safely and securely. And so we've been adopting measures to make sure we have security enhancements in all of our programs around the world. Ultimately today our focus is on the impact of what's happened a year past Mandela 100, and so today that's really why we're here, to focus on tracking and reporting and making sure that those world leaders who had, as you say, the spotlight are actually accountable to make sure they follow through on the commitments that they made.
Yeah. All right, so, we do put that behind us, but that was that little bit of taste that was left in South Africans' mouths after the concert, unfortunately. But perhaps the reporting back now of how it did help a lot of other people, will sort of bring a bit back to the focus on a lot of people. So we talk to global citizen being global, but there's also here in South Africa, it's one thing, but the aim was to impact the lives of 6.24 million South Africans, while other African countries, Namibia, South Sudan, Nigeria, as well as people in the Middle East and Asia, have there been a trickle through to the other countries?
Yeah, there has been. To give you a couple of really great examples, over 50,000 actions were taken by global citizens calling on specific nations to increase their foreign aid levels. And in response, the Irish government responded and made a commitment to increase their foreign aid towards 0.7% of gross national income. And I'm proud to say that in the last 12 months, they increased their foreign aid by 16%, which equates to over $150 million per annum in new capital unlocked, which was all as a result of the campaign Mandela 100. Another great example was global citizens took over 50,000 actions calling on the Belgium government to respond and support menstrual hygiene management, programs to end child marriage, and also family planning programs across Senegal and Togo and Benin. And in response, the government of Belgium committed over $49 million to support programs. So these are examples of where the impact wasn't just across South Africa, it was across the continent and was around the world. Yeah. And so what we know is that as it is a global movement, we need governments all around the world to step up and adopt the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These are 17 goals with 169 indicators designed to end extreme poverty, tackle inequality, and also tackle climate change by 2030. And these aren't just goals for South Africa. They're not just goals from my home country of Australia. They are the world's goals because they were signed on by all 193 world leaders.
Yeah.
And we see our role at Global Citizen is to ensure that countries adopt those goals, measure, track and have accountability programs to make sure that they're ultimately tracked over the coming 10 years.
All right. Just finally from the House of Mandela, your partnership going forward with Global Citizen, still a working relationship? Any other partnerships in the lines?
It's still a working relationship.
Great.
We do have an educational program that we're working on now.
Yeah.
But it's not something I can talk about at the moment. But our focus is really on the food security program in Kunu.
Oh, good.
And hopefully, by this time next year, we will see, the results of all of that.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I really do. We'd love to come and see it and help where we can.
Absolutely.
Because that is something that's so important for the area. But education, we know that's probably the number one issue that needs to be helped here in South Africa.
Yeah, but I mean, it dovetails with so many things, right? If you're living below the poverty line, you're hungry, you can't focus at school, it has so many other side effects. I think that it's, as you said, that we have all of these goals that we want to work on, but, we can only work on them one at a time.
Absolutely.
So hopefully, through all of our efforts and the Global Citizens' efforts around the world, we'll be able to make a positive impact.
Fantastic. So, Hugh, this has also been a great year for Global Citizen. I know that I read it. It's coming up now on the 13th of December. Is that correct? At Royal Albert Hall? Is that something different?
No, that's right.
That's it. So it's coming up at Royal Albert Hall. I mean, I read the lineup again. Sting, John Legend. You got a whole host of names doing one in London.
Yeah, so the focus this December 13 is on the Global Citizen Prize. We realize that, in history, often the great artists can win a Grammy, the great musicians can win an Oscar. But if you're a young activist trying to create change in the world, you may stand a chance one day of winning a Nobel Peace Prize, but it's so hard and out of reach. We wanted to create the Global Citizen Prize to really award and recognize the young activists around the world who are creating change.
Wow.
So on December 13, live at the Royal Albert Hall, everyone from Chris Martin from Coldplay, John Legend, Sting, Jennifer Hudson, incredible artists will all be there that night to celebrate those young activists, to award them. One lucky winner will win $250,000 to support their programs, to support change. Last year, a young girl from Kenya, Wawira Najiru, set up a school feeding program called Food for Africa in Kenya, and it's having amazing results, feeding over 50,000 kids across Kenya. And they're the sort of young activists that we want to support in the future.
That is fantastic. And hopefully one day we'll see a South African activist go up there and receive something.
Absolutely.
So really great. Thank you for coming in and talking to us and just giving us some feedback on Global Citizen a year ago and how much has trickled down through to the different charities and organizations, and all those promises, were they fulfilled? And if they haven't, they'll certainly get a little bit more sting coming their way to make sure that they fulfill it. Hugh Evans, thanks so much, CEO of Global Citizen, and Tukwini Mandela from the House of Mandela, talking to us also about this food project that we're looking forward to seeing coming out of Kunu, and how, of course, this will benefit South Africans as well. Let's take a break.